Alex, if you'll get us started on your end. He's still there? All right. All right, everyone. Welcome to the February 19th meeting of the Rotary Club of Beaver Creek. I'm your host and president, Mike Canada. I am glad all of you could be here today. I would like to thank our greeters, Brandon, Eric, Denny, Dave, everybody that greeted someone. I'd like to thank Mike Zwick for our great speakers and programs, which we're in for a treat today. Jim Gundel and Alex Zaharia for our website and YouTube, and Beth Cusack for our book dedication. I'd like to welcome all of our members who joined us today, any guests that may be joining, and if you are a guest, I'd like to pause here so that you could introduce yourself, please.
It's just me again, Amanda Hayes.
Welcome back, Amanda. This is what, third for you?
Yeah, that's correct.
Awesome.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Brian. How are y'all?
Great. Good to see you.
All right.
You too.
Any other guests that may be joining? All right, and as always, a special welcome to our speaker, Justice Dewine from the Ohio State Supreme Court. Thank you so much for making time for us, Justice Dewine. So far, our club's been averaging 37 on Zoom and 13.5 on YouTube. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Bad Dave Fleming for our Sergeant at Arms report.
All right. Well, you'll have to explain to Justice Dewine how that got started. So in the news today, 57.7 million COVID-19 vaccinations have been given out, although bad weather has caused some delays. Corporate CEOs' confidence in the nation's financial situation is 77 points, whatever that means, but it's reportedly the highest level since 2004. 82% of CEOs expect the economy to improve over the next 6 months, a jump from 63%. But other consumer confidence surveys indicate households making less than $75,000 a year feel pessimism about their financial futures. Dow hit new all-time high on Wednesday, with hope for government stimulus and the rollout of COVID vaccines. Former President Trump, of course, dodged an impeachment conviction, bullet in a Senate vote that failed to reach the required 2/3 majority, but his possible legal troubles are far from over, as he is now, as a private citizen, facing multiple legal cases. Republican leaders are falling all over themselves and each other, trying to react successfully to Trump's behaviors and future influence in the Republican Party. Some sports news. Philadelphia Eagles traded Carson Wentz to the Colts in exchange for 2 draft picks. The NBA announced it will hold its All-Star festivities March 7th in Atlanta. Basketball star LeBron James, who was a talented wide receiver in high school, football wide receiver, says he always thinks about whether he could have made it big in professional football as well as in basketball. Naomi Osaka took out Serena Williams in the Australian Open tennis, and Stefanos Tsitsipas defeated Rafael Nadal, but then in turn lost to Daniil Medvedev. Around the world, some other news. It was a good week for children because a bill was introduced in the North Carolina state legislature to raise the state's legal marrying age from 14 to 18. State Representative Jason Symes said, quote, "This state has disturbingly become a tourist destination for those seeking or looking to marry children or get married to children, child brides." Good for North Carolina for making that change. was a good week for getting your stuff after Kanye West removed 500 pairs of sneakers out of the Southern California home he shared with his estranged wife, Kim Kardashian, while she was on vacation in the Caribbean. So I guess she lost her shoes. It was also a good week for frozen assets after retired Navy Lieutenant Paul Grisham, 91 years old, of California, was reunited with a leather wallet he lost in 1967 while stationed at a research base in Antarctica. The wallet was discovered behind a locker when the base was demolished in 2015. In the ensuing 5 years, Grisham wants to thank a series of people who tracked him down and returned the wallet. It was a bad week for sore losers after the mother of Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes complained about officiating during his team's Super Bowl loss she complained to Giselle Bundchen, I think is her name. That's the wife of Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay quarterback. And this is what she said in a tweet. If you have to have the ref on your side or on your team, is that really winning? It's also a bad week for mixed messages after the organizers of the rescheduled Tokyo Olympics announced it will ban hugs, high fives, and other unnecessary forms of physical contact this summer, but it will distribute 150,000 free condoms to the residents of Olympic Village. It was a bad week for unseen enemies after British mathematician Kit Yates calculated that the 2 quintillion, this is a big number, the 2 quintillion very tiny coronavirus particles in the world would fit inside a single Coke can. So then we'll go to some information put this down and open up only in America. Oh yeah, a Louisiana woman who used Gorilla Glue to keep her, a Louisiana woman who used Gorilla Glue to keep her hair in place has hired an attorney. Jessica Brown went viral with a video in which she says that her hair hasn't moved in a month. You think? Even after chemical solvents were applied in a hospital emergency room. Brown complains that Gorilla Glue's labeling warns only against getting the product in your eyes, on your skin, or on your clothing. It doesn't say anything apparently about hair. Members of New Hampshire's House of Representatives can no longer have pets in the room during video meetings. Democratic Representative Anita Burrows says that after her 2 cats wandered into sight during a meeting, Republican Chairman John Hunt banned animal appearances. Some of us are wondering if it wouldn't be just as well to let cats in those houses of representatives and let the cats do the voting. Burrows said having her cats with her while she works is calming and is part of the life we're living right now. Okay. So a couple other humorous things for today. Quotes, a quiet man is a thinking man. A quiet woman is usually mad, angry. And this has to do with a female behind size study, and you can fill in the word. There's a new study about women and how they feel about their behinds. The results were very interesting. 10% of women think their, quote, behind is too skinny. 30% of women think their, quote, behind is too fat. 60% say they don't care. They love him anyway. He's a good man, and they wouldn't trade him for the world. Oh, husband sat in his room throwing darts at his wife's photo, but not even a single one hits the target. From another room, his wife asked the husband, "What are you doing?" And her husband says, "Missing you." Missing you. There's two golfers. We have a few golfers in the Beaver Creek Rotary Club. And we have some old golfers in the Beaver Creek Rotary Club. One of the old guys says, "My old eyes aren't what they used to be. Did you see where my ball went?" The other golfer standing beside him says, "Yep, but I can't remember." Diet day 1. I have removed all the bad food from the house. It was delicious. Did you know that 14 muscles are activated when opening a bottle of wine? Fitness is my passion. Today I got up at 5 a.m. I did an 8-kilometer run. I came back, prepared a vegetable smoothie for breakfast. I don't even remember the rest of the dream. Let's see. And finally, something called, where is my Beaver Creek Rotary thing? Copy. Only in America. Oh, I can't find it. Oh, it's in my file. Hold on just a second. Finally, this little story. The mother-in-law arrived home from the shops to find her son-in-law, Patty, in a steaming rage and hurriedly packing his suitcase. "What happened, Patty?" she asked anxiously. "What happened? I'll tell you what happened. I sent an email to my wife telling her I was coming home today from my fishing trip. I got home and guess what I found? Your daughter, my wife, Mary, naked with Joe Murphy in our marital bed. This is unforgivable. The end of our marriage. I'm done. I'm leaving forever." "Oh, calm down now. Calm down, Patty," said his mother-in-law. There's something very odd going on here. Mary would never do such a thing. There must be a simple explanation. I'll go speak to her immediately and find out what happened. Moments later, the mother-in-law came back with a big smile on her face and said, "Patty, I told you there must be a simple explanation. She never got your email." Okay, so we do have some birthday. Well, we don't have any birthdays, but we do have a 3rd year in Beaver Creek Rotary anniversary for Marie Klinger on the 16th. And Dan Tobias celebrated his 15 years as a member of the Beaver Creek Rotary Club on the 17th. And I will conclude with fines. Justice Dewine may be able to figure out that it's really hard in this environment to collect these fines, but we level them anyway and hope that people are honorable about paying them eventually. So it's $1 fine if you were married before you turned age 18. It's $1 fine if you owned 500 pairs of sneakers. Oh, heck, it's $1 fine if you have 100 pairs of sneakers in your closet. It's $1 fine if you ever lost a wallet or a purse. And it's $1 fine if your team lost the Super Bowl, even if you think that the referees caused the loss for you. And I will now turn the microphone over to the president for the collection of Happy Bucks.
Thank you, Dave, as always. Justice Dewine, I thought I heard you say it's been about 6 years since you've been here.
That seems right.
Okay. I would
maybe
venture
a
a
little
guess
less.
that the Sergeant at Arms report hasn't changed much since you were here.
It did seem
All
a
right,
little
do we have any Happy Bucks?
I have a happy buck. Both my wife and Greene County did a great job of setting up the COVID shots routine. I saw your post, Ed Shaughnessy, and both my wife and I have completed our second COVID shot. So we're just hanging around, and I'm very happy to have gone through the process. It took me a while standing outside, but that's the whole nother story.
Yeah, this is
Mike?
Ed. I would
Mike,
second what Denny said, that the Greene County did a great job. Their new location over at Russ is way better than standing out in the cold at the Career Center. And yes, I got my second shot and I'm done and I'm happy.
as long as we're on the subject, we got our second shots yesterday at the Rush Center. in good shape.
Thanks, Jerry. I have a happy buck. I'm happy to see Carrie Tucker today, and the other Carrie Souter as well. Welcome, guys.
Yeah, I'll throw in a happy buck. This weekend, I was supposed to be in Washington, D.C. for the North American Youth Exchange Network Conference. It was going to be in Crystal City, Virginia, which is right outside of Washington. But obviously, COVID has gotten in the way. So instead, I'm going to get to spend this evening and tomorrow on Zoom and doing a Zoom conference. And I'll give a second happy buck because yesterday it was announced that the 2027, write this down on your calendars, Rotary International Convention will be in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Mike, I have a happy buck. It's for Max McConnell. He's not on here today. He's out, but he was able to work with Ohio University and the Russ Research Center when Greene County Health Department lost the site of the old Career Center. So I know they were scrambling to find a place. So Max worked pretty hard in 2 days to get that all set up. And shout out to our fire department auxiliary, our fire department who's been out there every day, as well as our deputy sheriff. So thank you.
Alex, I'll second that happy buck too.
Just want to say thank you, Alex and Randy. I appreciate that shout out.
Well, we're gonna rack up the fines today, Dave.
Yeah, I've got two. Last week I said I was closing on a 15-year, and right after I got off the meeting, our lender called us and said there was an error with the paperwork. So today I am closing on a 15-year. And the second one is last week on Friday after the meeting, I bought a Ruger 1022, which I'm excited about. But the sad news is good luck finding 22 long rifle ammunition in this environment. I did find it and it was 18 cents a round and I cried. So.
Ouch. Are there any other happy bucks? All right, we'll move on to announcements. Eric had mentioned this a little bit already, but Rotary International's canceled the in-person international conference in Taiwan. It was scheduled for June. There will be a virtual conference. I know a lot of people don't have an opportunity to attend the international conference, so virtually, if those that are interested want to attend, that would be great. And as an FYI, the 2022 conference will be held in Houston, so I hear. The District 4-Way speech contest will be held, and of course it'll be virtual. The District Speech Committee Chair Beth Huber is putting together final touches on a formal announcement. I know we've participated in that, and actually we've had a couple of district winners there. Denny Jarvis helped out with that a lot, so I know he and Praytap will work on that. The district judging will take place at the end of April or early May, and there will be an increase in the prize money this year for district winners. We'll have a board meeting after our Zoom meeting for those that are interested and want to attend that. And then again, if you're a guest and haven't already, if you'd please put your email in the chat so we can follow up with you on membership and get you on the weekly email list. Are there any other announcements? Hearing none, we'll move on. So at this time, I would like to turn the mic over to Representative Lampton, who will introduce our speaker and program for today.
Thank you, President Mike. Good to see everyone. Justice Dewine, just so you know, the bad Dave came when he was providing his sergeant's report and had several negative attorney jokes to tell. And so Justice Kennedy nicknamed him, "You're bad, bad Dave." So that's where that came from. Anyway, pleased to introduce our Supreme Court, Ohio Supreme Court Justice this afternoon. Mr. Zwick and I did attend your swearing in. He officially took office January 2nd, 2017. Justice Dewine is known for quality and thoroughness of his legal opinions. His opinions reflect his strong belief in judicial restraint and his respect for constitutional roles of all of the co-equal branches of government. Justice Dewine has served with all levels of the Ohio judiciary. Prior to his election to the Supreme Court, he served 4 years on the First District Court of Appeals, and prior to that, on the Hamilton County Common Pleas. He's a strong commitment in furthering the rule of law through education. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati College of Law, where he teaches appellate practice and procedure. In addition, he's taught undergraduate courses at the University of Cincinnati and Government and Politics and American Courts. Justice Dewine brings a unique perspective to the bench because he's also served as a county commissioner and a member of the City Council of Cincinnati. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Justice Pat Dewine.
Great. Thanks for having me again. It's always, I can't say it's good to be in Greene County since I'm sitting in Franklin County right now in my office, but it's always good to talk to a group where I know a number of you. So thank you for having me. I'm going to, I know that I've spoke to your group before. I know Justice Kennedy has. So I know you know something about the Ohio Supreme Court. But what my presentation today does is kind of take a little different perspective and walk you through a case from beginning to end, and kind of shows how the court works. I think it's important that we go out and talk about what we do on the Ohio Supreme Court. When Alexander Hamilton was trying to convince the citizens of the new country, former colonies, to ratify the Constitution, what he said in the Federalist Papers about the judicial branch was that it was the least dangerous branch of government. And what he meant by that was, unlike the executive branch that has the army and call the army to enforce its will, or unlike the legislative branch that can use the power of the purse, power of taxation to get what it wants, all the judiciary has is its will. All the judiciary has is judgment, the confidence that other people place in it. You think back around the Board of Education, for example, desegregating the schools. The judiciary made a ruling, but that ruling meant nothing unless other branches of government were willing to enforce that and abide by it. And so it's important that we talk about what we do as judges, because I don't know if we're really the least dangerous, but I do think we're probably the least understood branch of government. So let me just tell you a little bit about what we do here. Let me just get this slideshow started. There we go. So this is kind of I start some basic questions and I'll go through this quickly. People ask, why you're elected on the Ohio Supreme Court. Why are you elected? Well, the reason goes back to our Constitution of 1851. Before that, the legislature actually had appointed all the judges in Ohio, including the Supreme Court. And believe it or not, there was a lot of unhappiness about that. People felt like judges were kind of in the pocket of the legislature, did what the legislature wanted. So the proposal was to move to a federal model and have the governor appoint judges. But people said, you'll have the same problem. Judges will be holden to the governor. And so what ultimately the citizens chose at that constitutional convention was that judges should be elected by the people. So they're answerable to no one except you. They're accountable to no one except the people. And I think that's a pretty good system, at least in theory. It doesn't always work all that well because a lot of times people don't understand much about the judges they vote for. So I think for that reason, too, it's important that we go out and talk about what we do. So why does the Ohio Supreme Court matter to you all? You hear a lot about federal courts, but the reality is 90% of cases take place in state courts. And in Ohio, the Ohio Supreme Court's going to be the last word. All the other courts in Ohio follow the precedent set by the Ohio Supreme Court. I think the most important thing is that it protects the courts protect our individual rights and freedoms. Our Constitution guarantees us certain rights: right to free speech, right to be free from unreasonable search and seizures, right to a jury trial, right to freedom of religion, Second Amendment right to bear arms. None of those rights really mean anything unless you have the courts stepping in when other branches of government infringe upon those rights. It's important to jobs and the economy. We don't think about it, but having clear legal rules, allowing people to know what the law is, makes people able to invest and do business in the state of Ohio. What you see in places where the law is not clear, where you don't have a good judicial system, is people aren't as likely to invest and create jobs. Public safety, of course, our courts are going to be where our criminal law is enforced and interpreted. So public safety, of course, become very important to that. And finally, even where areas our courts don't touch, they become the backdrop that allows other things to happen. We don't think about it, but you write a contract, for example. That contract's just a piece of paper, except someone has the ability to go into court and enforce it. So even when we don't see the courts day to day, they really do make a difference in allowing us to live our modern lives. So I'm going to shift gears, and I mentioned I was going to take you from a case beginning to the end. So I'm going to tell you a little story about two flower shops in Worcester, Ohio. One was named Worcester Floral. One was named Green Thumb Floral and Garden. Two competitors, two little flower shops, fairly small town, probably not that difference in size than Beaver Creek. The owner of one of the stores, Worcester Floral, decided that she was done. She was going out of business. So she set about doing the things that you do when you wind down a business. She had a domain name, worcesterfloral.com, which is important for our purposes. She let that domain name lapse. She started doing, closing down. But in the meantime, one of her employees stepped in and said, I want to buy this flower shop, or I want to run this flower shop. And so she said, well, it's not worth much. I'll sell you the assets for $1. So she bought the assets. The employee opened up a new flower shop, really the same flower shop, but slightly different business. Instead of Worcester Floral, it's Worcester Floral and Gifts, LLC. Well, remember I had told you that the old owner of Worcester Floral had let the domain name lapse. So in the meantime, the owner of the competitor, Green Thumb, bought the domain name from the domain name register, GoDaddy or one of those places. She paid the, I don't know, a couple $100 or whatever it costs, and she bought the domain name. So if you were in Worcester, Ohio, or if you're in anywhere, and you typed in worcesterfloral.com on the website, here's what it looked like. So it was set up to redirect someone from worcesterfloral.com to Green Thumb's website. It's not all that uncommon. I'm sure most of you, all of you, have had the experience of being on a website, typing one name and getting sent somewhere else, either mistyping a name or maybe just typing something else, but being redirected to a different website. Well, the owner of Worcester Floral did not think that that was very fair. She was extremely unhappy. She went to the owner of Green Thumb and said, hey, I registered the name Worcester Floral. This is my name. It's my flower shop. Stop using the domain name. Give it to me. Well, the owner of Green Thumb said, no, I paid for this. It was allowed to lapse. I own it fair and square. Tough, but if you want, I will sell it to you. I'll sell it to you for $2,500. Well, the owner of Worcester Floral didn't think that was fair. So, it's being America, what did she do? She filed a lawsuit. So she filed a lawsuit in the Common Pleas Court in Wayne County. She alleged that this was a violation of the Ohio law on unfair trade practices that makes it illegal to use advertising that creates a likelihood of confusion as to the source of goods or services. She asked for an injunction from the judge to stop Green Thumb from using the name. The judge held a bench trial. There's no judge or jury. The parties agreed to have a bench trial in this case. Judge heard the evidence. We had some customers testify about whether they were confused. Judge looked at the law, and the judge said, no, I don't think this is a violation of the law. So what do you do then if you're Green Thumb? Well, if you're Green Thumb, then you have a right to appeal. Everyone in Ohio, you have one appeal of rights. You're allowed to appeal to the Court of Appeals automatically. You just have to pay your filing fee, fill out a one-page notice of appeal, and you're allowed to appeal. So when you go to the Court of Appeals, it's a little different than the trial court. There's not one judge, there's 3 judges. And the judges don't hear evidence. They're just going to hear arguments from 2 attorneys, usually about 15 minutes aside. And the question is, was there some error of law made by the court below? Well, the 3-judge panel, in this case, it's the Ninth District Court of Appeals. In your case, it would be the Second District Court of Appeals, but we have 12 courts of appeals in Ohio, depending on where you are. So this one went to the Ninth District. The Ninth District voted 2-1. The trial court got it right. So what happens now? Green Thumb, the owner of Green Thumb, the owner of Worcester Floral, she's not done. I'm going to fight this all the way to the Supreme Court. So what do you want? What do you do if you want to appeal to the Supreme Court? Well, it's different than the trial court. In the trial court, everyone can appeal. Everyone can appeal from the trial court to the Court of Appeals. But to appeal to the Supreme Court, you have to ask for permission to hear your case. So you have to file what we call a jurisdictional memorandum saying why this case is so important that it should be one we hear. And generally, we're not looking just for cases where there was a mistake below, but we're looking for cases where there's something of great public or general interest, something that deciding this case is going to matter not just for these parties, but for other people across the state. There's an important unanswered question of law that needs to be answered. The odds are pretty tough. In 2019, there were 1,100 people who filed jurisdictional appeals. We only voted to hear 43. But Worcester Floral got in. We thought this was a case where there was some uncertainty in the law and needed to be answered, so we voted to hear the case. So what happens once the case gets to the Supreme Court? Well, the first thing that happens is each party writes briefs. And when you watch TV, you see oral argument, you think that's the really important thing, but really the most important thing is the briefing. That's probably where judges generally make up their mind. In this case, because Worcester Floral lost below, it got to write the first brief, then Green Thumb got to write a response to that, and then Worcester Floral got to the last word, got to write a reply brief. We get those briefs. What I do is I read those. I read all the briefs before oral argument. I also assign each case to a different law clerk. I have 3 law clerks. So the law clerk reads them and writes me a memo. I like to read the briefs before I read the law clerk's memo because I don't want to be colored by how someone else looks at it. So I read them first, kind of come to what I think, then read the law clerk's memo. And if we agree, it's usually pretty easy. If we disagree, maybe we have some more discussions. Maybe there's something that I want more information on. I go back and forth. But generally, by the time the oral argument day rolls around, I have a pretty good idea how I think we should decide the case. So after briefing, oral argument is scheduled. In general, each side gets 15 minutes to argue. We hear cases generally 2 or 3 days, generally 2 days every 2 or 3 weeks. And so on days we hear cases, we'll probably hear 5 cases. So, most people think of us just sitting on the bench, but the reality is that most of my time I spend reading and writing. But on oral argument days, it looks kind of like this.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Our first case is 2018-1814, State of Ohio versus Gerald Prendergast. For Mr. Prendergast is Victoria Bader.
So when we hear argument, all 7 of us sit and hear the case.
Good morning. May it please the court. My name is Victoria Bader.
And so if you watch this argument, she would probably get about 30 seconds, a minute, depending on the case, into what she was saying, and then we would interrupt and start asking questions. It's not, what I tell my students is, don't think of oral arguments as a time when you're going to walk up there and give a 15-minute speech. It's really a time for a conversation with the justices. Different courts may be different, but in our court, it's a fairly hot bench. So you're going to spend most of your time asking questions or answering questions. That's what oral argument used to look like, and I hope it will soon. Today, unfortunately, it looks a little bit more like, looks like this. Whoops.
Our second case is 2019-322, Worcester Floral and Gift LLC versus Green Thumb Floral and Garden Center. For the appellant, Ms. Audie.
Good morning, Your Honors, and may it please the court.
I know if you're looking at that, it looks like I'm paying no attention, but actually I have 2 computer screens, so I think I was looking over at the other screen at some of the briefing in the case. But we're doing our oral arguments now on Zoom. We've been doing them that way, I guess, since March. I don't mind it. I miss doing it in person, but I feel like as far as the information we get, it works pretty well. I worry more about our trial courts where they have need to have jury trials and evidence and witnesses and exhibits. The pandemic's been much tougher for them than for us. We've been able to pretty much keep the same schedule and hear the same cases as we otherwise would. So after oral argument, after both sides have argued, what happens next? Well, we huddle. We go back to conference room and we talk about each case. So conference room looks something like this. It looks like, well, not something like this. This is our conference room. That's what it looks like. The way that we proceed is we start with the least senior justice. We start with the chief justice. She says what she thinks about the case, and then we work our way down the table from an order of seniority. It's kind of an interesting process because there's a strictly enforced rule that on the first go around, everyone gets to say what they want without interruption. And it's hard to get used to, really. I mean, I'm someone who's likely to jump in if I think someone's saying something wrong or want to ask a question, but it's very strictly enforced. You let everyone talk once. And actually, I think it works out very well. It's a good way to run a meeting and let everyone, make sure everyone's been heard. So we'll go around, we'll discuss the case. We'll do that once where everyone talks, and it's kind of a free for all. And then once everyone's talked all that they want to, then it's time for a vote. We vote from the least senior member of the court on up. So the newest person has to vote first. Once after we vote and we've dealt with all the cases, then we have to decide who's going to write the opinion. And so to do that, we have this little bottle. I don't know if any of you've seen this. I was on a Zoom call yesterday, and I didn't know this before, but the guy told me it was called, for a game called P-Pool or something. It's essentially, it came out of a bar, and I think there were would usually be 8 of these tokens, die things that go in there. And I think the way it was used was you would roll it out and then you would have to knock that ball in. But we use it to decide who's going to write the case. And so I am, for example, number 2. The chief or the senior associate justice puts all the die in the bottle. She rolls the bottle, and whoever number comes out gets to sign to write the opinion. It's a little more complicated than that because only if you're in the majority do you actually go in the bottle And we have a system where you don't go in the bottle if you've already got a decision until everyone else gets one. So to keep everyone writing the same amounts. But it's different than the U.S. Supreme Court, say, where the Chief Justice assigns the opinion. We do it randomly. And I'm not sure why that started, but it's always been the tradition of the court, I think, for a long time. Certainly, since well before I got here. So after we leave conference, then it's time to write the opinion. You'll see in this case, I was rolled out of the bottle. I was assigned to write the opinion in Worcester Floral. I wrote an opinion that upheld the trial court that said the standard under the law is whether there is a likelihood of customer confusion about the source of the goods and services. There may be, in this case, there may be confusion when you first go to the website, but by the time you get there, it's clear where the goods are coming from. It's clear that if you're ordering on this website, they are coming from Green Thumb, so it doesn't meet the standard for actionable confusion under the law. 5 justices agreed with that opinion, or actually 4 justices agreed with the opinion. Justice Donnelly agreed with the result. For some reason, he didn't agree with my logic. I'm not sure why. He didn't really say. And then Justice French disagreed. So she wrote a dissenting opinion. And the way it works is once the majority opinion is written and then the dissenting opinion is written, we vote again. So sometimes what will happen, actually more often than you think, the dissenting opinion, after everything's been written, everyone can see it on paper, will get more votes than the majority opinion. And then you have to flip everything. The dissent has to rewrite their opinion into a majority, and the majority then rewrites theirs into a dissent. So that happens sometimes, and that kind of delays things. But it's fun when you're the dissenting justice and you've convinced other people to switch their votes after they've read what you have to say. So when I write, why do we write written opinions? Why isn't it like Law and Order? We just sit up there and say, okay, you win, Green Thumb. Well, I think part of it is to go to the legitimacy of the court, so people have confidence in what we do. When I write an opinion, I always try to put myself I always try to think about the losing litigants or the losing party. So I want them to be able to pick up the opinion I wrote. I want it to be written in plain English. I try not to write in legalese. And I want them to be able to pick up that opinion and say, I may not agree with the result. I certainly don't like the result, but I understand that there was a reasoned process that went into this. This wasn't based on the whims of judges, but it was a decision that was based on precedent and the rule of law. You'll see, as I mentioned, Justice French wrote a dissenting opinion. So that brings me to the question of why don't judges always see things the same way? We're dealing with the same law, right? So we're all have legal educations. Well, why are there dissents? Well, a few reasons. One, I think, at least at our level, we're only taking the really hard cases. You saw we only took 43 of 11,000. So we're taking cases where there's room for disagreement. If there's not much room for disagreement, it really shouldn't reach our level. But the other thing is judges do have different judicial philosophies. I look at my judicial philosophy as being someone who says, I'm going to be a textualist. I'm going to apply the plain language of whatever's in front of me, whether it's a statute, a contract, or constitution. It's not my job to legislate from the bench. If the legislature wants to change the law, they can do that, but I'm going to apply the plain language of what's in front of me. Other people may take a more kind of purpose-based or an intention and what the intent is of the legislation approach, and so they may be more willing to go beyond what the strict language says to meet a particular circumstance. I don't like that because, in my view, that really just invites the judges to substitute their view for what the legislature was, and it's really not our role. But people do have slightly different judicial philosophies. So last question that I often get about our cases, and you might ask in this case, is this the end of the road for Worcester Floral? Can they appeal? And the answer is no. This is a question of state law, so we are the final word. You cannot ask the United States Supreme Court to hear the case. They have no power to hear the case. It's a matter of federalism. When it comes to Ohio law, we get to say what it is. Now, we might have another case where there was some question of federal law. For example, we might have a criminal case where the defendant said that there was an illegal search of his house in violation of the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. So if it's a question of federal law, then we're not the last word, and you can ask the United States Supreme Court to hear our case. Just like when you come to us, there's no automatic right to appeal. You have to write what they call a petition for certiorari to the Supreme Court, and the court has to vote, or at least four members of the court have to vote to grant that petition in order to hear the case. So questions of federal law, you can ask the U.S. Supreme Court to hear our decisions. Questions of state law, you're done. We're it. So I'll just stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have my contact information out there. You can email me. I'm always happy to get emails. I don't get, I miss doing these things in person because I don't get the same kind of feedback and discussion with people that I do if we're in a room somewhere. So feel free to email me and also follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Let me just ask, does anyone have any questions, anything? I'm happy to talk about anything. It doesn't have to be about, this case or Supreme Court or anything. So,
Justice Dewine, I wanted to ask, how can someone ask to appeal to the Supreme Court more than once on the same case, or you turn them down the first time, that's it?
Yeah, you turn them down the first time, that's it. So it's what we call res judicata. So once a court has made a decision, generally, with few exceptions, you can't ask the court to relook at that decision. So once we've made the decision, it's over. You can actually, we do have a procedure where you can ask for reconsideration within a certain window. You have, I think, 14 days. So you could ask us to reconsider a decision. Sometimes that happens. But then once that window is closed, there's really no authority that we could hear the case again. Now, there might be the same issue come up in a different case, and someone, in that case could ask us to hear it. Sometimes we'll say, okay, we don't want to hear this issue, but then we realize when it comes up 4 or 5 times in different courts across Ohio, it's like, okay, this is becoming an important issue, so we do want to hear this. So maybe the first time we won't, but the third or fourth case, we might do that.
Thank you. And then you talked earlier about how I think Ohio is unique in that we elect the Supreme Court justices and really all the judges down to county and what have you, and municipal, and in a lot of other states, they're just appointed by either the governor or the legislature. I understand there might be a bill coming before the House, this General Assembly, to right now the elections are held. There are primary elections, and then there's the general election. But in the general election, the party, Republican or Democrat, is not indicated on the ballot. And I believe there's a movement or a bill to be introduced that would include the party in the general election. And I think maybe even specifically for Supreme Court justices, or maybe even Supreme Court and the District Court of Appeals. I just wanted to see if you're probably not even permitted to comment on this, Justice Dewine.
I actually, this is something I can talk about. I can't talk about pending cases or how I might decide a case, but since this isn't a case, I can talk a little bit about that. As point out, Ohio has about 2/3 of the state elect at least some judges, but we're the only state that has a system where you have a partisan primary. That means our judges run a Republican or Democrat primary. And then when it's time for the general election, they're nonpartisan. There's not an R or D by their name. So there's been talk about changing that. I generally think that that's probably a good idea. I just think that the reality is that judges are endorsed by political parties in Ohio. And so it's a question of, do you want to hide that information from the voters or not? And I just generally err on the side of more information for voters is better. And I don't think, I think the logic is we don't want an RRD to take partisan politics out of it. But if you're going to have a system where we run in a partisan primary, you're not taking the partisan politics out of it. You're just keeping that information from the voters. And look, I don't think an RRD is a great Republican or Democrat tells you a whole lot about how a judge is going to be. It certainly doesn't tell you about their temperament. It doesn't tell you a lot of things. But it is some information, and it's probably fair to say that if you have if you're a Republican judge, you're probably more likely to be a strict constructionist. You're probably more likely to believe in more judicial restraint. So I mean, it is, and if you're a Democrat, you're probably more likely to believe in a slightly more activist role. Now, that's not true for everybody. I mean, people really should do their own, you shouldn't rely on that, but it is some information for voters. And I just don't, I just think it's bad. It's bad to hide things from people. I think, let people have the information and make their own decisions.
Yes, thank you. And as you pointed out in your example case, that a fellow Republican provided a dissenting opinion. I'm guessing that happens relatively often.
Yeah, I mean, certainly right now we have 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats on the Ohio Supreme Court. If you look at our decisions, they are, there's all kinds of different coalitions, certainly the Republicans and Democrats don't always vote together, probably don't most of the time. Most of the time, we're kind of all over the place. So.
Justice, is there ever an occasion when, because of a justice's inability to participate in a oral argument or in making a decision, is there ever a time when it would end up being a 3-3 split, and then what happens?
Not in our court. So under the Ohio Constitution, when, for example, I have a conflict of interest, which happens from time to time, I can't hear a case. Sometimes it'll be, I was a judge on the Court of Appeals and that case has reached the Supreme Court, or whatever reason, the Chief Justice appoints someone to sit in the justice's place. So on the U.S. Supreme Court, there's no procedure to do that, but under our Constitution, the Chief Justice can appoint any Court of Appeals judge in Ohio. So you have, so it's all people who are appellate judges. So at the next level, but she can appoint any of them, and she generally just pretty much rotates, gives different people a chance to do that. So I think that works out pretty well.
I've got 2 things real quick, and Judge Dewine, thank you for being here. First, as you said, race judicata. I hadn't heard that term in a long time. I'm from Panama City, Florida, where Gideon versus Wainwright occurred. And at that courthouse when I was growing up, they used to have a race called race judicata. And I didn't know what it meant. It just sounded like a legal term, and I went and did the race like every year. So it's funny to hear what that actually means. But my actual question for you is, the state of Ohio is gerrymandered beyond reason. I mean, the congressional makeup at the federal and state level does not make any sense compared to what the actual makeup of our state is. I mean, at the congressional level, at least, look at Snake on the Lake or Jim Jordan's district. It's comical. And I know that is coming up again here in 2020 or 2021, where they're supposed to redo it. But my thoughts are, what do you perceive the role of the Ohio Supreme Court in correcting this like absurd gerrymandering situation we found ourselves in?
Yes. So, our job is to make sure that the law is enforced. So, the law has been changed. We have not had a case on this, so I have not really gone back and looked at it closely, other than just reading the newspaper articles, at the time it was done. But likely it's very likely that the legislature will do something, and there'll be a challenge that will come to the higher Supreme Court, and we'll have to look at just what the standards in the law are and whether or not those are met. And I really expect that we'll have cases on this, because what the U.S. Supreme Court said last year, or a couple of years ago, when they had the case, was essentially that they're not getting involved. These are really, these are really state issues, and it's part of the political process. So, there are standards. Like I said, I haven't looked at the law in a long time, but there are standards in the law about keeping counties together, et cetera. And so it'll be, someone, if the legislature passes a district, someone doesn't think those standards are met, then they'll bring a case, and we'll have to decide whether or not the standards in the law are met.
I don't envy you, because I know, like you said, one of those cases will come up. Someone's not going to be happy. So good luck when that time comes.
I assume we will, but you never know.
Justice Dewine, does the losing party pay like court costs all the way up, including those of the Supreme Court? And if so, how much might those be? I was curious that the original owner was going to sell the rights for $1. So
yes.
I was just wondering what kind of costs are there?
So what we call as lawyers' court costs can be assigned to the losing party, but those aren't probably what you think of as court costs. Those are things like cost of transcripts, those kinds of things. Generally, the real cost of courts, are attorneys, and generally the American rule is each side pays their own. So unless there's a special statute, or unless there's a rule, so there's certain rules say if you do things in bad faith, if you do some really egregious things, you can be ordered to pay the other side's attorney's fees. There's certain laws that say, okay, well, loser pays, but for 98% of the lawsuits probably out there, each side is going to pay their own attorney's fees. So you can argue about whether that's good or bad, but that's the system we have. It has its pluses and minuses. It can, if you have a system that goes the other way, you may encourage a lot of litigation because people want to, get their fees paid. Our system can seem really unfair sometimes to someone who gets sued and has to end up paying an attorney. But that's the system we have now. This is a case where clearly they would have been better off from a financial. Worcester Floral would have been a lot better off paying the $2,500 in the beginning buying the website. So, and I don't have any special insight to why they didn't. What I will tell you, particularly from my days as a common pleas court judge, when I was trying to get people to settle cases like this, is that people don't always make decisions in litigation based upon dollars and cents. I mean, there's a lot of emotion that goes into cases. There's a lot of, I've got to prove I'm right. I'm not going to give in to this person. And what I saw a lot of times with the trial court judge was, when I first got on there, I said, okay, this case ought to settle. This is stupid. They're going to spend more on attorney's fees than they can ever get out of it. So I'm going to sit them down and tell them, right at the beginning of the case, and try and explain this to them. And I did a lot of that. And every once in a while it would work, but probably most of the time what you realize was that these people had to go through the process of fighting it out, wasting a bunch of money until it really hit home that what you told them at the beginning was right and they ought to settle this case. I'm curious, I don't know if the lawyers in the room have similar experiences, but that's, you see a lot of kind of irrational kind of behavior. I mean, as a judge, the trial court judge, you can sit there and say, these people will be much better off. I'm sure attorneys tell them, but there's just a lot of people feel they've been wronged, and they're not going to give in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again, Justice Dewine, for speaking with us today and your service on our Supreme Court. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Thank you, Justice. Again, thank you for your time and presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Justice, for being with us today. In your honor, we will be donating a book to the Beaver Creek Community Library called The Star Shepherd, which is a novel about a boy, his trusted dog, and his best friend as they race to save the stars before the light is extinguished for good. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Next week, we will have Amy Harrison. She is the CEO of Harrison Latham, giving us a presentation on how important it is to keep your employees happy. She will be introduced by our very own Eric Marcus. As a reminder, please keep an eye on upcoming programs at beavercreekrotary.com and Facebook. Is there anything else for the good of the club? All right, just as a reminder, hang around here if you want to attend the board meeting. If not, have a great weekend and we'll see you next week.